It is recording already, and it's going live on YouTube. And welcome everybody for the Spring 2020 Culmination Project Selected Presentations. And we are featuring 6 people. And one of them, Anthony, couldn't take a day off from his job, but his teammates, Sabrina and John, will be covering what Anthony did. And so actually before that, we have our department chair, Professor John McCullough. Let's welcome him.
Hi, Ray. Thanks for organizing this, putting this together. Yes, hello. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for joining us to help celebrate these students finishing their culmination projects. I've already seen all of these presentations, and I know that we have some really great projects, some students who really stuck it out through some tough circumstances, and who really showed a dedication to their craft, dedication to their education, and I'm sure that they got a lot out of these projects, and that the education they got from doing these projects will serve them well in their careers when they graduate and we all get back to having something of a career in this industry. Enjoy the show. I won't take up too much more of your time, and we can just get right to the presentations. Thanks, Ria.
Thank you, John. So we'll begin with Sabrina, then John. So just because it was a team of 3, so let's wait for the Q&A session after both of them presented. Then after each Q&A session, let's make sure that everybody unmute yourself. Then they can hear we are clapping. All right. So Sabrina, are you good to go?
I'm ready. Okay. I'm gonna start sharing my screen now. Oh, it says that it's disabled. I can't share my screen. That's unfortunate.
Wait. Okay, how about now?
Yes, thank you so much.
Great.
Hold on. Oh God, trying to move that. There we go. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sabrina Ramos, and I'm going to be covering me and my group's culmination project with Anthony Rivera and Johnny Colonna, 920 and Area 51 raid. So for most of you who don't know what 920 is an inspired event that was going on September 20th of 2019. There were various Facebook events popping up, and it actually made national headlines where people were trying to raid or storm Area 51. We collectively decided we wanted to use this as our construct for our game and idolize it into our foundation. So this game initially is a 2D top-down survival shooter game where you play as Soldier Briggs to protect Area 51's secrets by fighting off waves of aliens or enemies. Now, the 2 main focuses that I worked on for this project were animations and mechanics/controls because they're very much interchangeable. Now, before getting into my roles, I wanted to talk about the inspiration and game concepts that inspired the foundation for this game. The 2 main game concepts that we were looking into was box head zombies, which is located on the top, and Plants vs. Zombies, which is the image on the bottom. The reason why we were so inspired is because this layout for the enemies was a very traditional arcade style format, and that's what we were trying to go for the concept of our game. Now, roles and project goals. The roles that I took on is I was an animator, a programmer, and a game designer, as well as our overall goal for 920 was to have a functioning prototype. This meant we were going to simulate death and damaging, character attacking, start, game over, and pause menus and screens, a wave progression system, which I'll get more into, and an inventory and shop system as well. Now, going into the mechanics and controls, I focused heavily on player movement, enemy movement, and weapon swapping with the main character. Player movement was very simple. It's mapped to your traditional keyboard WASD keys for up, down, left, and right. You had your mouse to aim and click to shoot. as well as the enemy movement. As you can see on the screen, the enemy was following the player at all times once the player spawned into each wave. The enemy is able to deal damage on impact to the character itself and also dies on impact with the player or a bullet. The three main weapons that we had were pistol, which is the main starting weapon for the main character, shotgun, which is purchasable in the shop, and a knife when you run out of ammo. Going on to the animations, this was something completely outside of my realm. I've never worked with animations in Unity before, so learning this on my own was a very interesting process. I did the animations for 4 states, pistol being the main game state for the player, shotgun, knife, and an idle state when the player is just standing in place. So all of these animations were done frame by frame in Unity's Animator. We also implemented all of these animations into the scripts, as you can see on the right side. There were key press feedbacks on keys 1, 2, and 3 on the keyboard, and frames flipped for movement, which I'll dive more into. So the key press example on the side basically showcases the states that the player would go through if a key was pressed on the keyboard. For example, state 1 indicates that if you press a key, which that key being 2 on the keyboard, the knife state is now active and the pistol state is no longer active. That meant that during that game, you can see the seamless transition of animation from switching from pistol to knife. And we did that for a variety of states. And probably that was one of the most challenging things, to ensure that each frame flowed really smooth into each other. And each of these followed a specific format for keys 1, 2, and 3 as well. Now, diving a little bit more into the animator window, as you can see, the orange box represents the first initial game state. With that, you can transform that character or that Boolean, true or false, into a new state that the person or player is able to actually activate. So pistol active is the main state. If it meets a condition in the code, true or false, then it'll trigger a new state, which changes that character's sprite as are showcased on the bottom, and that will be the primary weapon of choice as you're running through the waves. So we had pistol state, which is the sprite on the bottom, knife and attack, which had 2 different sprites for its animation sequence, and then a shotgun state, which was vastly different from the pistol state, as there is a burst of bullets rather than a single bullet for the pistol. So we wanted to make this as diverse as possible and ensure that there was enough player and game feedback that would give it a nice and complete arcade feel. Unfortunately, Anthony Rivera wasn't here to help with our presentation and talk about his role, but Anthony's role was significantly important. He took on working with sound effects and background music for the game, as well as formulating the environment and obstacle locations for different drops in the game as well, which I'll get into. Anthony worked on mapping sound effects to weapons and obstacles, sound management cues and triggers, as well as active states that repeat sounds with a specific trigger located on the right side. He used most of the code that I was working on for the animations to ensure that once the character is in a specific state, if you press the key, it'll activate that sound cue to flow seamlessly with that animation. On the bottom, he had his sounds mapped to specific objects in the game. We have crates, which are drops that the player can run into, this being health or ammo. And for each crate, there is a crate breaking sound. And once you run into it, it kind of triggers that state and you'll hear the sound in game. Also, Anthony implemented a lot of assets into our foundation. He created interactables for the game health and ammo crates. He also made obstacles that dealt damage if the player ran into them, causing them to be stunned. And he created sounds for, as I mentioned, getting the crates and spending intel in the shop system as well. So the materials that we use to create 920 is Unity being the primary game engine that we used, 2D sprites, which were my ordeal, that was what I focused on the most, and then sound effect and background music assets. The accomplishments for this, we were actually able to have a playable demo / prototype. You were able to see player and enemy movement, bullet projections, animations for those weapons and movements, as well as keyboard and mouse functionality. However, this doesn't come without challenges. We dealt with a lot of challenges, and personally, that was something that took a massive toll on me. One of the biggest challenges I dealt with was having to use CityTech's Unity version and making sure when we brought that version home, we weren't accidentally updating it, because that can cause a lot of bugs and inconsistencies. I had a lot of script overriding issues with trying to convey one script and it was overriding something that was already attached to a game object that would cause certain things to cancel out. I had to take various steps back, kind of work on it one by one. Obviously, we had time constraints given the circumstances that we're in. Condensing the original idea was a huge component of one of the challenges. We had 34 pages in our game design document, and trying to condense that as much as possible for one semester was a huge challenge. Thankfully, we had our technical advisor lead us the correct way. We knew what we wanted to do and we just moved forward. Overhauling assets was also a very heavy component. We did have assets that weren't ours and we needed to remove them per request of the creator. Limited weapons. I originally wanted to have more weapons into this game, but again, we had to condense. Then when it came to scripts, we also had issues with the bullet shooting only to the right. You couldn't see the sprite visible on the left side, invisible enemies that would attack your health bar, invisible bullets that dealt damage to random enemies, which was not ideal for what we wanted. For future editions, me and Johnny actually spoke about wanting to pursue this after CityTech. So we wanted to collectively begin working on making new enemy variants, potentially adding a boss stage, doing the additional weapons that I actually have the sprites for, and the animations for those weapons as well. Creating a secret ending. The primary gist of the game that we weren't able to convey is that once you reach 51 waves, you are given a new consensus of the story and you're able to dive in deeper into the actual lore, as well as cutscenes and dialogue, which was what I was going to work on heavily, but again, with time constraints, I had to cut that down, but it's something that I would definitely want to tackle in the future. So that being said, that is my part of the presentation. I will give it away to Johnny so he can explain his progression as well.
Hello, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Can you guys see it? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is John Colonna. I worked on 920, the Area 51 raid, with Sabrina Ramos and Anthony Rivera. So now, like Sabrina said in the presentation before mine, 920 was based on the real event that happened, the Facebook group, where people tried to raid Area 51. So we did a bit of a play on that, where you play as Soldier Briggs and you try to stop an invasion of aliens that are taking over Area 51. And this is a top-down shooting game made on the Unity engine in 2D. So now our main goal was to just come out of this with a functional prototype. And in that, we wanted start screen, main level, player functionality, health and ammo pickup, working shop, functional enemies, wave system, game over screen. It was a lot of different elements that we wanted to put into the game. And our game design document was 34 pages. So we definitely had to cut a little bit that we originally wanted. And my main focuses for the project were the UI and UX elements, which are what the player sees and feels while they're playing the game. The wave and shop system, which was essential for the progression of the game. And I also focused heavily on different bug fixes that me, Anthony, or Sabrina ran into. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about jumping onto a project versus starting from scratch. Like, they both can be difficult. Sabrina and Anthony approached me at the beginning of the semester and asked me to jump onto this project with them. This screenshot on the left is what the game originally looked like when I first started with it. And we didn't really have any UI elements. The player couldn't really see too much. So that was why that became my main focus. I originally was going to work by myself, and it's just such a different process having worked on projects by myself versus working in a small group. But what became the hardest part for me was I had to look at the work they already did and try to understand all the work that they had previously done and be able to add to it. So this is, if anyone's never seen this before, this is what the Unity editor looks like. And it's a lot. There's a lot of different elements on the screen, and they have a lot of, and the hierarchy, which is what's going on in the scene of the game. I had to pick apart each one of these elements to try to understand what's going on. Because if I didn't understand how objects were interacting with each other, I couldn't edit anything. I couldn't try to help fix anything. And most importantly, we couldn't progress the game. So the UI is what I mainly work on. And this is the original version in the top left. We just had the health bar, we had a pause menu, and the score. I took a lot of time trying to revamp it. I added the ammo system, an enemy remaining system, the wave system, a currency system, a shop, and a game over screen. All of these elements are essential for when the person's playing the game. If they've played games before, they can intuitively just know, okay, that's my ammo. When I click the mouse to shoot, I'll use some ammo, and then if I run out, I can't shoot anymore. Okay, enemies remaining. When I run out of the enemies remaining, I can progress the game. When the waves go up, I know I'm doing better at the game. And this is what the final UI looked like. We moved the inventory down to the bottom left of the screen. The ammo we replaced with the image of the bullet. The currency we changed to intel. As you kill the enemies, you gain intel to use in the shop. When you bump into the crates and your health is full, it shows a health full option to let you know that you can't pick it up. And this was the final shop. I spent a lot of time working on the shop, and I was actually really proud of how it came out. You were able to buy health, able to buy ammo, and able to buy the shotgun that Sabrina had programmed. And then once you could not buy it anymore, the sold out sticker would appear over the object. I wanted to include a little bit of the code editor as well. I'm not going to go too in depth on how the code actually runs, but I had a lot of these different windows open through my time working through it, and understanding what's going on in here is the most important part of making this game work, because through all of these different lines, we had to talk to each of the objects and tell them what to do, tell the UI elements what to display. And it can be messy at times. We tried to keep it as neat as possible. So this was when I first joined on the game. One of the issues we had was the enemies would be invisible, and that's not good for a game. So you would just run into invisible enemies and not be able to shoot, like Sabrina had said before. There were a lot of enemies there, just we couldn't see them. So I spent a lot of time working on that. And I also wanted to take some time to talk about something that Anthony and I worked on together, because he couldn't be here to talk about his own part. The health and ammo crate pickup was essential to the game and making it feel like it's an actual video game. Him and I worked very closely to try to get that as functional as possible, and I believe we succeeded very well. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, was because of the state of the world, we had to do this project remotely. We couldn't meet up to talk about what we wanted to do. We had to do everything over messaging systems and push to Git and pull, and it became tough. We only had one merge conflict, so that was good. And it was overall a different experience, but I think I learned a lot from it, being able to work remotely and still getting our project done. Another issue that I touched on before is learning a new project. I had to take about a month to just rip apart all of the elements they had already done, just to understand how it was working. Another problem I faced was learning the UI. Before this project, I had never worked with UI in Unity, so it was all new stuff to me. So I was very happy to learn all the new things. And with that, there's new code to learn. And the last issue was taking on too much. Like we said, 34 pages of a design document, it was too much for us to do in 4 months. And now future editions, I had talked to Sabrina about this after we presented Culmination the first time, and I was like, I really want to continue this game. I'm really proud of where it is, and I want to continue it. So we want to add more weapons, better shot functionality, cutscenes, stronger enemies, a leaderboard system for people to play and compete against their friends, and different play areas and maps. I have a gameplay video. I am going to try to share the audio. Okay. I'm sorry if this is a little loud, but I'm going to let this play out. On the main title screen, when you hit the controls, this shows you the controls, WASD for movement, T for pause, attack with space or the left mouse click. When you press play, go into the game, the pause menu, you're able to shoot the enemies and walk around. Those are infinite sounds, as Sabrina had mentioned before, with the different crates. Helpful. And as the enemies continue to go down, the shop opens up, it shows the health, the ammo, the shotgun. Press 2 to start the next wave. The wave number changes. Now this is the knife that Sabrina had worked on. You can swap between the knife and the pistol. Whenever you want by pressing 1 or 2. Each wave gets progressively harder by adding enemies. There you take damage from walking into an enemy. Okay, using the currency, the intel, able to buy the shotgun, and the shotgun shoots differently than the pistol. Amy and I worked hard on this, trying to get the spread of the bullets, pick up the health. The shotgun uses 3 of the bullets. And then after a little while, if you run out of health, last stand, and you get the game over. Press enter to try again, and the game will load. Thank you. I believe that's the end. Yes.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sabrina. And yay! Let's start taking questions or comments. Anyone?
That was so cool. That was like the coolest thing ever. Both like, whoa. That blew everything out the frame for me. Like that was really dope.
Thank you.
About how many pages of coding did you guys have?
Oof, that's a little hard to kind of measure into pages. We had various scripts. Each script had a different functionality. We were trying to initially compile it into like a game manager, but I don't really have a lot of experience, and none of my team kind of like knew how to compile it into like one functioning script. Honestly, I believe we had maybe over like 12 or 15 different scripts for running a variety of different things in game.
Yeah, and then each one varied in length. Like we had to create scripts even sometimes just for one line. Like I know to display the high score, that's just its own script in one line just to make sure that nothing else touches it. Allison?
Really phenomenal work. I'm not surprised knowing all of you, and it's amazing to see this come together, especially given all the circumstances. I'm particularly impressed with just the way you really organized your process and really had clear goals to get to a functioning prototype. That's not easy to do, and it's what people struggle with professionally, over and over again, being too ambitious and how do you get there, especially working in a team. So I'm wondering if, both you and Sabrina, Johnny and Sabrina, if you can think about what do you think maybe the special sauce was in this for your ability to work together? What did you find were maybe like the strategies that really made this all work?
I think we were in constant communication, like everything we did, everything we got working. Like I sent a picture to our group chat with Sabrina and Anthony, like, oh, cool, I have this working, I'm going to push it now. And then they were able to pull it and continue working. It was just every step of the way, we kept each other updated, like, okay, I'm going to work on this now. okay, cool, because then I can do this. And then, okay, great, I'll work on this after you finish that. And it was just constant communication.
Also adding on to that, I've worked with them for almost 2.5 years. We have really great synergy together. I've worked on separate projects with Anthony, separate projects with Johnny, and we kind of just mash really well together. So kind of compiling all of our skills and working on one collective thing was fantastic. We honestly had no issues moving forward when we were getting everything done.
So just as a quick follow-up, is there any advice you have for other students who are trying to embark on a culmination project in a small group together? Any tips that you would give?
I think one of the biggest tips is learning when to narrow down certain things. When we first started, like Johnny mentioned, our game design document was absolutely insane. We covered a huge array of different scenarios, different things that were happening in game, cutscenes, stories, and things of that nature. But making sure that you, as you move on with your team, can collectively decide and figure out, okay, maybe we can take this out, maybe we can add this later. Knowing your boundaries with your teammates and making sure everybody knows what they're doing is one of the biggest things. Having people that are kind of just sitting in limbo and waiting until last minute is not really ideal. For that, we all pushed each other. That was like one of the biggest things that we did moving forward. There were times that I was kind of like losing my mind, ripping my hair out, trying to get code done, and Johnny and Anthony would kind of help. They would look up tutorials, send it my way. Then I'll just like take a breather, get back into it, and I would do the same for them too. So it's just baby steps and kind of feeling out how your team works in that aspect.
So just from a management standpoint, what platform did you guys use to communicate, and where did you because the entertainment kids don't know, where did you store everything and collaborate? And then I know Adam teaches scrums. Did you actually do that in this project, or what did you do to push your deadlines and all that kind of stuff?
Honestly, we used Facebook Messenger. We already had a group chat on it.
Okay.
And we were already talking on there. So, but as far as the versioning control and everything like that, we used GitHub, and we were able to push everything to that and then be able to pull it, because we didn't want to try to keep zipping the file every time we made the tiniest change, just for someone else to download the entire project all over again.
Is your work public on GitHub?
I don't think so. I can make it public though.
Okay, cool. And do you mind like sharing the link so I can view the script?
No problem.
Hey guys, I have a question for you. First of all, I think you did a really fantastic job. You have something that's functional, and that's really big to accomplish that in such a short period of time. So that's very impressive. I wanted to ask, I know Anthony isn't present, but I understand that he did most of the sound design and the music. Can either of you speak to what tools he used to generate the sounds and the music?
So it was a very similar process for us finding the assets to begin with. We were using open source websites to try to figure out what sounds would work, what sprites would work with the game itself. I know Anthony took it upon himself to look through maybe 7 different open source links, try to narrow down the exact feel for each weapon, for the box opening. He kind of went a little overboard, but it was well worth it. He has this way of working with certain things. So his sound design process was kind of going over and over again. He would send me a video. Hey, how does this sound? Does this match the gun? Does this match the way the bullet's supposed to sound when it hits something? Like, we were just kind of going through that circle of processes and making sure that it sounded the way it needed to, and then collectively shared it.
So he searched for and found open license music and sound sources. He didn't create these from scratch.
No, I know we had spoken about wanting to do that. Anthony was really trying to get some sounds generated, but overall, with all the time constraints that was happening, we kind of were opting more towards, let's just try to figure out something that was the best sounding piece that we can add to this game object and see it from there. But he was very dedicated in his process.
Got it. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments?
One more. Hi, guys. Super proud of you. It's amazing, from like the original concept and design document from experimental game design class to where it's gone. Tremendous progress. Also, what I'm very pleased to hear is that you have such clarity of communication around the tech pipeline, that you understand from like the, the conceptual framework and then all of the various types of components in terms of that process that needs to go into, and also the capacity to be able to sort of understand and sort of troubleshoot, where things were kind of going amiss, and the ability to just communicate so seamlessly, it seems, across, digital channels. So I think you actually picked up a whole other skill set, right? Which is like a lot of teams in the game design industry actually do work remotely and communicate across different departments in this way. So I think just in terms of like understanding the whole pipeline and actually being able to implement something in such a short time frame lets you understand that you have the capacity to, even if you scale and grow this one, great, but I think you can even start a new game from scratch and understand all of the core components. So very impressed. Also the way, just your self-knowledge of your process. The last thing I guess I'll ask is around, do you feel as though you are missing anyone on your team in terms of things that you think might need to be like any additions, or you guys might have gaps, I guess? So
Yeah,
for instance, like in terms of like the design aspects would be one thing. It might be nice to bring on a graphic designer to help you think through sort of, the actual assets in the font families and the UX and UI. I was thinking that was one of my observations. But in terms of like the core functionality, I think you have a very complementary set, but I think one additional person might be to bring on a designer to think about layout and look and feel and all of those things. But I don't know, just throwing that out there, are there any other areas that you feel would help with the scalability of the game? So
yeah, I think a graphic designer would definitely be something we should consider trying to find, because while I like the look and the feel of the game, like there's a lot more that we wanted to add and we just couldn't focus on the art. We focus on the functionality between the three of us. So definitely considering trying to find a graphic designer for either starting a new project or continuing with this one.
Awesome. I'm also so excited you got through all of the waves that you envisioned. So that was like a big, I thought that was probably the biggest hurdle for the project. So cool. Thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have another question. How were you guys able to do the graphics for what you have now? Like, who came up with that?
So a lot of them, like with the sounds, we downloaded free assets from various websites, and then we just kind of reworked them for what we wanted to use. So like the crate, the ammo crate and the health crate was a combination of 3 different assets we found, just kind of thrown together in Photoshop to get the feel that we wanted. And I actually think it came out really nice. And then like the enemy was just a soldier enemy that we kind of reworked a little bit and colored green to get that feel. And yeah, definitely free assets helped us out with this one, because like we said before, we focus mainly on the functionality.
Okay.
Cool, thank you.
All right. Are there any comments, questions? If not, I'll ask everybody to unmute yourself. Congratulations, Sabrina, John, Anthony. Congratulations. Yeah, so I do have the unmute all button, but it doesn't do it right away to everybody. That's why I asked you to do it yourself. Anyway, so thank you very much. The next presenter is you, Ishelle. Are you good to go?
Hello, everyone. Share screen. Okay. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Ishal Disla. I am an entertainment technology student. My 2 tracks are audio and video productions, and today I'll be talking on my culmination project, which is titled Frequency Spectrum Analysis and Wireless Microphone System Project Specification for the Voorhees Theater. My technical advisor was Sean Huntington. So as you already heard, this project has a very long title, and it was also a very large one to do. So I divided it into parts, where part 1 include the spectrum analysis, where I did research, talked to experts, studied basic radio, and assist several webinars. And part 2 was actually doing the project specification, where I build a new wireless system for the theater, find the components for it, write a purchase proposal, and all of that. Back in March, when we were able to still be in the theater, a COT, Bailing, and we did a rebuild of the current wireless system in the theater. So that was also fun to do. So most of my project was paperwork. So that's why I'm going to try to illustrate what I did by explaining what I did, where part 1 was actually a spectrum analysis. So a spectrum refers to the invisible radio frequencies that wireless signal travel over. The frequency spectrum can be shared among many different broadcasters like TV stations, radio, cell phone companies, internet providers, and they all operate in the very high frequencies and the ultra high frequencies radio ranges of the radio spectrum. So the reason we have to do a spectrum analysis is to measure all the radio frequency activity present in the Voorhees Theater. That way, the data that we get from that can help us inform what ranges are ideal for putting our wireless system in. So a wireless microphone system works exactly like a radio, where by moving a dial, you pick up certain radio stations. So by assigning different frequencies to a microphone, you pick up audio waves. So we don't want to be in the way of other broadcasters that are using the same frequency ranges, because the entertainment industry operates in the empty spaces that other TV station broadcaster leaves us to operate. So the way we did that was by using a spectrum RF Explorer spectrum analyzer that gave us a true reading of the frequency spectrum in the theater. And with that information, we uploaded to a software called Wireless Workbench, and we did a frequency coordination. So the device is this one right here, and it has an omnidirectional antenna that gives a scan that slightly looks like this in the space. And once we had that scan, we imported it to Wireless Workbench. So this is a screenshot of the file I did in Wireless Workbench. This program has multiple capabilities like inventory, monitoring your system, or doing a frequency coordination. So I imported the scan right here and adjusted the range of this diagram to be from 470 megahertz to 600 megahertz, which is the radio range that the entertainment industry can use to operate. And so we can see here that everything above this red line is what we consider it to read. And all these peaks are TV station, radio stations, and all of that. So we can be in the middle of those, because if we coordinate our microphones to be in those same frequencies, we will get that interference. So we can see here this blue part. This is our current wireless system. A closer look is right here. So to illustrate, the whole range is 470 to 600, and our wireless system can only operate from 518 to 578. This is roughly like a 60 megahertz increment. So it leaves a lot of room for error, since we can only use those empty spaces between other broadcasters. So doing the scan actually made me realize why our current wireless system is not ideal. Oh, well, to point out, I didn't do a scan. John Huntington went and did the scan from the parking lot next to the scenery shop, because school was closed. So that's the reading we have right here, which is what we will roughly get if we were doing the scan from inside the theater. So after I had that information, it was easier for me to see why our current wireless system is not optimal. So I picked a wireless system that works best for what we can work with. So that's when I started to do the project specification, which is part 2, which was basically to explore softwares and equipment to improve and replace the current wireless system in the Voorhees Theater. And this documents illustrates a complete description of the equipment's functionality and performance details. And this was delivered as a purchase proposal. It totaled 10 pages, and it has all components that would be needed for this system to be working at its best capabilities. And this system is actually able to work in the full range. So we can take advantage of all these empty spaces and lower our risks of interference and other errors. So after I developed that document, which took a long time to figure out all the components because it was much more than just a receiver and a transmitter. I had to look for antenna distribution systems, cables, and all these components that are needed for this system to be performing as its highest capability. So once I did that, I adjusted a purchasing request sheet with all the elements and all the prices and handed all these documents to the department for a future purchase that they wish to do. And this total $37,856 with 38 cents. That's what it will cost the department. And yeah, that was basically my project. So a recap of my deliverables was that I did, well, Bailey and I did a rebuild of the current wireless system in the theater. I also had an interview with a wireless system microphone expert, Josh Flower, which works for Jet Wireless. I did a frequency coordination for the current wireless system in the theater. So I kind of figure out what frequencies would be the best for the system we have right now. And I did a purchasing proposal, a purchasing request sheet, and I also did a start guide for a future student that wishes to do this in our current equipment. So I wrote this document where all these steps, and if they follow, they can learn how to do a frequency coordination and also apply those frequencies that I find for the system to our current system once the school is open. So as a final thought, I decided to include this slide, which was not in my first presentation, because someone asked me, how relevant will this new system be? And actually, our system was the best it could be by the time we bought it. It was roughly good for 10 years, but wireless is something new in the entertainment industry. And we have all these cell phone companies which are coming in and demanding a reliable signal and powerful radio waves. So that's why they are buying all these bunches of the radio frequency spectrum. So to summarize, this new system will be the best for the school as long as we have the frequencies of that frequency range from 470 to 600, because we don't know when the FCC is going to sell those portions out. So it's the best we can get for right now, and it's as relevant as today. There's no way we can know how long it will be an optimal choice. So some of the challenges I faced by doing this project was not knowing anything about radio. I didn't know anything about radio. So I kind of had to study my way up and learn all of this in a span of like 3 weeks by myself, assisting several webinars that thank God were available by Shure and other companies. And this helped me a lot. Also, I was unfamiliar with what a microphone system was, what elements it had. So not having equipment to see, it kind of was harder to figure out the components of that equipment, because I had to read several manuals and figure out what antenna will fit this receiver and so on. Another challenge was having no on-hand experience. I gained a lot of software experience, but no device experience or manipulation with hardware. And also the quarantine was a big challenge because I struggled to focus in my house, as it was very hard to get to that point of actually completing the project from home. How would this add to my future career? Funny enough, I also wanted to add this. I didn't mention it in my first presentation. My first job ever in radio or entertainment was as a mic runner. I basically clean the mics or literally hand out the mics to the artists. And now with this knowledge, I can actually see myself doing the job of my supervisor back then. So seeing that direct link between a project to an actual job is very beneficial, and it's something that I'm gonna work on so I can gain more skills and actually do a job that is in the same level I was doing, but with a significantly higher rate. And just to end, I want to give acknowledgements to John Huntington, which was my technical advisor. He kind of threw this project onto me, and I'm so grateful that I was given this project because I learned so much and it's so beneficial for my career. Keith Rubinstein, who is here, he gave me a lot of support and feedback on my documents. I was not sure if I was writing it correct for like the corporate world, so he gave me that eye, and that was very beneficial. Professor Rioya, which was our faculty advisor and guided us throughout the whole semester. Josh Flowers from Jet Wireless for his guidance on our interview. My friends and family for their unconditional support, and the department for picking me to do this select presentation. So thank you very much.
Great.
All right. Let's take some questions and comments.
What do you think was the most like funniest thing to find out, or like most interesting, I guess, when learning after your research?
Well, if we go by funniest, is that I didn't know that it was kind of funny to visualize that radio stations are actually like always transmitting to the air, and you kind of pick up what you want to listen to. So actually seeing like that and like knowing that, I was like, wow, I can't believe I didn't know that before, because it's like common knowledge. But I think that was very interesting to know, and challenging was also to write the document, because I was not sure if I was missing elements or giving more elements that what the actual system needed to perform.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go. Ishel, that was great. Like you said, I looked it over beforehand, and I've had a lot of experience putting proposals and bids together, and you did an excellent job. My one question is, I'm just curious why you stuck with Shure. I mean, that's a great choice, but there's other sort of equal manufacturers that are considered industry standards, and I'm curious why you chose Shure as opposed to maybe Sennheiser or some other manufacturers.
So the only guideline when I was assigned this project was to use a Shure system. So that was already given. I knew I had to use something Shure because the new theater that is in the new building, the A building, is completely equipped by Shure wireless system. So they want to kind of equal to that
You want to keep it consistent.
Exactly, throughout the theaters, yeah.
Excellent. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was me. As she said, the new theater has an Axion system, and we want to be able to share parts with them, so we want to stay in that realm.
Excellent choice. Those things are that's a great system.
But I said it in the earlier presentation, but I thought this is a fantastic presentation. Great job on this whole thing. And I think it's a really good model of a very successful culmination project, in that you expanded your knowledge, and then as a benefit, you actually gave something back to the department, because you just saved me like a couple of days of specifying things and researching things. To now someday when we have money again, I can just take your paperwork, update it a little bit, and submit it. So that's really a great thing for the department as well. But I think, I said in the other presentation, you really, like, you went away for a couple of weeks and came back with this huge chunk of this thing done on your own, and that's so great, because in these days where you're always going to have to learn something new, like having that ability to go off and research something and do it and talk to experts whenever you need is really, that's a critical skill. And I know it's going to serve you very well as soon as we all get back to work. So congratulations, great job.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Anyone else?
Coming from an MTech standpoint, I just want to say it was very well put together. Like somebody like me who doesn't really understand a lot of the ENT realm is able to kind of like read what you were saying and read into your PowerPoint and kind of understand what you were talking about, the challenges, how it changed your dynamic over like the span of the situation that we're all going through. So I thought it was very well put together. I just wanted to let that be known.
Thank you very much, Sabrina.
All right. If there's any more comment, it's time to unmute yourself. And congratulations to Michelle. Thank you. And congratulations. You did well. Okay. And the next presenter is Solange.
Okay. Can you all see my screen? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Solange. Thank you for attending our presentations. I was the lighting designer for A Cowboy from the Bronx show. A Cowboy from the Bronx is a one-man show created by Angelo, or better known as AJ Silver, that combines a lot of storytelling, comedy, and of course, Wild West arts. This show was scheduled to come to the Voorhees at City Tech during the spring semester, but due to current events, it had to be postponed. So I will be talking about my transition from preparing for a light show to a theoretical project. So one of my main goals once I graduate from City Tech is to actually become a lighting designer. And from very early on, I knew that my culmination, I wanted to do something related to lighting. So when this show was given to me, I was very excited. For those of you who are not very familiar with what a lighting designer is, I will just go briefly over. A lighting designer's job, other than the obvious or the main one, which is to provide visual clarity on stage, is to actually illuminate a storyline. So we help create and enhance the mood of a play. We are in charge of the emotional content of it, per se. We also help establish time and period. Is it day, is it night, and the location of the play. We do something called selective focus, meaning we can control the audience attention by highlighting objects and people on stage. And we also do some fun things like creating light plots and doing standard documents for production that I will be talking about, such as instrument schedules, channel hookups, and so on. So I started my research back on December. I wrote my proposal, I got approved, and I started immediately researching what a Western West show tends to look like on stage, what kind of colors, what kind of textures. And I took a couple pictures, I put them on a mood board for reference, just to see what other designers tend to use on stage. These pictures served me and were very influential for my design later on. The first meeting that I had was with William, the set designer, and he provided me an AutoCAD file of his design, his set design. This allowed me to create a lighting requirement list. The lighting requirement list is very important for us designers because it allows us to know what kind of room we have for our fixtures and equipment in general. So for this show, I knew that we were gonna have a screen with a video projecting, a ground rail and a fence underneath that screen, 6 flats in total, different sizes, and a horse leg stage right. Then Angelo was very kind and he provided the production team with a video of his show. His format is the same every time, so this helped me out a lot. I watched the video a couple times and I started taking notes. For example, I noticed that he changes his outfits throughout the show. And this was important for me to know as a designer because color reflects different textures and fabrics. I also noticed that he wears a cowboy hat on and off. That helped me right away understand that I needed some side lighting and some front lighting from Catwalk 3 and Catwalk 2. Also taking into account that he was gonna have the video projected in the back. He also does some very cool tricks. Two of the main ones that stood out for me were the boleador tricks and the glow-in-the-dark lasso, which he does at the end. These two tricks were very important for me because I didn't need to light them too much. They were lighting effects by themselves. I just needed to enhance them a little bit more. Then I went on to choose my colors. I ended up choosing 12 colors and a gobo. Thankfully, they were all available at the ENT department. And then the fun part of choosing my lighting fixtures. As a first-time designer, I was very lucky to have conventionals and moving lights. I ended up using a total of 94 fixtures for my light plot, 45 of them being ellipsoidal source force, various degrees that I mainly use for front light and upstage. My parts were gonna be used for some washes and some specials. My Martin Atomic, I was gonna be using it for a thunder special. My Vivids R21s were gonna be used for foot lighting and a variation of moving lights for various jobs. I also created my light plot on Vectorworks 2020. I created my paperwork on Lightright and Microsoft Office, and I intended to do the programming of the show and the Ion console. Unfortunately, I did not get to do that. This is a copy of my light plot. I just color coded it for you guys to see what I intended to do in terms of lighting systems. So as I mentioned, I needed a side light and I needed a front, but I also needed upstage, I needed footlights, I needed center wash, and I also had a couple of specials throughout the design. This is just a little bit of rendering that I did on Vectorworks, combining the lighting systems that I just mentioned and the scenery on stage. Sorry about that. Okay, so after that was done, I moved on to the paper part of my project. So I started creating the instrument schedule and the channel hookup. This is actually generated by Lightright once you connect it to Vectorworks. For those of you who are not very familiar with what this kind of documents is, it's pretty much just a spreadsheet that you give to your lighting crew, and specific your master electrician. And here you're gonna be finding data organized by hanging positions, the circuits, the channels, the addresses, etc., that the master electrician needs to know in order to hang and prep your fixtures. For my design purposes, I'm just gonna mention I had a total of 13 positions for my instrument schedule and a total of 88 channels. And then move ahead and I did my magic sheets. Magic sheets are very important for us designers. They're like a simplified version of your light plot, and it's a very quick and easy reference to know where your lighting fixtures are laid out in the venue. So I created mine into two categories, system and specials. This is a picture I took throughout the process of prepping and hanging the fixtures with the lighting crew. They got to hang 6 out of 13 positions with the first, second, and third electric and all the catwalks. Unfortunately, this is where my project kind of stopped being hands-on, and I have to move on to a theoretical project. So the first thing that I did during quarantine was a Zoom meeting with the other designers. I did a paper tech and I created my lighting cue breakdown. This is like a layout of the different looks that I thought were gonna happen throughout the show. The show's like an hour and a half, so I created 49 cues in total. And then it came time to execute my project, my vision. So since I didn't get to do it on stage, I had to find other ways to visualize my concept. I happened to have some scenery track, so I created my flats. I recreated the Voorhees technically to scale in my kitchen. I created the fans, cut the flats. I ordered some LED finger lights from Amazon, and I had a swatch book, and I just cut the colors and I put them on the lights, and I started just playing around with my design. I created 4 concepts. I did 2 systems and 2 specials. So my first system was my side light. This is obviously the closest that I would get to show what I would have done at the Voorhees in terms of angles. And this is a center wash, probably some of the colors that I would have liked to use during the show. And these 2 are my specials. Angela requested from the very beginning a red wash for a part of the show and a heaven look light that was gonna happen throughout it. By doing this, I actually learned a lot, and it taught me a lot about quality, direction, and shapes, angles, the depth. I was very lucky to have something tangible to play around with. I learned a lot about warm colors, cold colors, and it was just very nice for me to do something hands-on at the end of the project. Some of the challenges that I actually faced, when I started, I have very basic knowledge on vectors. So I had to really rely on my tutorials and on Miguel, who was my technical advisor. I had no access to Vectorworks file for like a month, and I had no other access to my visualizer to create other visuals. So this is why I had to recreate it in another form. But overall, I think my accomplishments were greater. I learned to improvise a lot and work against adversity. I improved my skills on Vectorworks greatly. My time efficiency and management improved a lot. And for future projects, I will definitely include delays as part of the planning. And overall, I just learned that the show must go on, even if it's just on paper. And just to wrap it up, a little bit of acknowledgements and thank yous to my technical advisor, Miguel, for being there for even before Culmination, helping me very patiently, answering my questions all the time. For Professor Robinson, thank you for all the revisions and all the advisements. Thank you. To Angelo, because Angelo in his team, because without him, there will be no show. So thank you also for allowing me to freely come up with the concept for your show. To the production tech lighting crew of Spring 2020, the ENT department, my family, for being there all the time, and to my leader model, Tinkerbell. Thank you.
Thank you, Solange.
I have a question. You believe like the skills you developed at Celebrate Brooklyn contributed to your skills on the project?
Celebrate Brooklyn was a big part of lighting, and I mean, I have fun there, but honestly, this was more towards designing. I didn't get the opportunity to design anything in Celebrate Brooklyn. I was working more like a station and you know, carrying light fixtures and stuff. But in terms of designing, this project completely took over my time, and I learned a lot. But not too much from Celebrate Brooklyn, unfortunately, I guess.
Yeah, I understand. Cool, thanks.
I'd like to say something. I'm quite impressed. Right up there? Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
And I think the idea of the model is terrific. I mean, you know, that really seemed to work. And, you know, pulling success out of adversity, you know, that's great. I think that's what, you know, the Culmination projects, in a sense, are all about, even without being in the middle of a play. But yeah, very good work, you know.
Thank you.
It's Angelo. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It was such an absolute pleasure to work with you. I was so impressed by all your preparation. You watched the video and you actually knew the show better than me a few times when we discussed it. You have a great ear. You listen, you ask for an opinion, but you listen to it. But more important, you're not afraid to share your opinion and your desire and your vision. So I think that's an amazing combination and quality you have, and I so look forward to working with you again. And what a treat to.
Thank you, Angelo.
I just want to say, you guys, your whole production team really worked and collaborated well together. And I would say, from this experience, I want to ask you a question because I know you work so hard. I'm so proud of you. What would you do now that you've done this? What things do you want to change when we do it next spring? Now that you've done this once.
I feel like at some points I overwhelm myself too much, putting way too much things on my plate, and I wanted to get things done very fast. I wanted to see things done right away, and I just figure out through the process that it takes a process. It takes time to see your results. So that's one of the main things that I learned from this project. I will probably, if I were to do it again at City Tech, I'll probably make more use of the lighting lab in terms of choosing colors and using the fixtures instead of relying on my gel swatch, my swatch book, which was good, but I will have probably used more of the lighting lab, take advantage of it.
I have a question. So Solange, you emphasized that the route going from really not much knowledge in Vectorworks to kind of like dedicating a lot of time into it and really getting your skills, up a greater level at the end of the project. How do you see yourself, using these skills in the future? Do you really think this is an option for you now that you're graduating and then you want to go into the professional world and might be able to use them?
Definitely. Vectorworks was a challenge for me in the beginning, but I actually grew to love the program. I started from not knowing how to put a fixture to like knowing how to do renderings, and I definitely see myself working in the future with Vectorworks. I mean, I want to be a lighting designer or start assisting a lighting designer, and I know that's one of the main things that they usually look for someone who knows how to draft and use the program. So I am definitely looking forward to learning more about the program.
I just wanted to chime in and say congratulations. I think by accident there, you found that the model you built in your kitchen was worth its weight in gold compared to, say, a Grand MA visualizer. We've had many students do those visualizer culmination projects, and they come out being experts in the digital execution of what a design looks like on a computer monitor. But you achieved with Tinkerbell what they couldn't do, and that's actually seeing photons in real space hit an actual object, and then being able to use your eyes for the feedback, making aesthetic choices. I would keep that up for the rest of your career. And you mentioned the lighting lab, a very underutilized space as far as color choices are taken, I've always thought. Get yourself in there and get those colors out and see what happens when you buy the Woody doll from Toy Story and use him instead of Tinkerbell.
Yes.
Again, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please use the light lab. Please, someone needs to use it.
I miss it. I think this could be used as a portfolio piece to you as well. I think it's, maybe you modify it a little bit, but, it's tough to, say, interview as a lighting designer. Sometimes you wind up showing pictures of past shows and you don't get any feeling really of like what you'll like to work with. But I think this does come across, and as Angelo said, like what it was like working with you. I think this would be a useful portfolio piece to use in an interview.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought John Robinson was going to make more comments. No? All right. Any other comments? Anyone? Very
You
good.
killed it.
Great. Well, thank you, Solange, and congratulations to you.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to our last presenter, Mr. Chris Diaz.
Sorry about that. I thought there was one person ahead of me. Hang tight. Okay, sure. So. All right, cool. Thank you guys for being here today. I want to give a big thank you as well to the presenters before me. That was all very impressive work, especially when taking into consideration the circumstances in which we're working under. I had the opportunity to actually be able to complete this project before we went into full-on quarantine plague style lockdown. And honestly, the amount of work that you guys got done in these conditions is just absolutely mind-blowing, and you should definitely be proud of yourselves. And I'm, again, stunned. I'm here to present to you my culmination project. I like to call it an analog sound through digital means, or how I learned to love the phase. As a summation of the project, a good area to look at is the general goals. To begin with, I was seeking to develop digitally written and produced content, to develop an analog performance system for the content to be delivered, record the digital content through the analog system, so effectively taking something that was written in the world of bits and bytes and then record it in the world of actual vibration, and to measure for discernible differences between the digital content and the analog recordings. What it boils down to is a comparison to the age-old question, well, becoming age-old at least, of which is better, digital or analog, or is there even a difference? That's what we're going into the reason for doing it, to see what differences there may be, if they even do exist. And the method for our writing, amplification, and recording. Content creation was done all digitally through Ableton Live, in my particular case 9, because I had not yet upgraded, primarily using digital synthesis and virtual instruments. I have a little asterisk there only because the creative content of the project has since taken some changes. I have added some acoustic instruments to accent a lot of the digital writing, but that wasn't included in the measurement portion of this project. Just like to be nice and clear and fully upfront. For the recording system, we have a reamplification system, which would have audio playback sent out via a Focusrite Red 4 Pre. The balanced outs from the Focusrite interface would go into reamplification boxes, which are pretty much almost like tiny little DI boxes, but they work the other way around. They take your balanced signal and create it unbalanced. The unbalanced signals would then go in through traditional guitar and bass rigs. We have a Crate B100 guitar amp going through a Marshall 412 speaker cabinet, a Sun Coliseum 300 bass and keyboard amplifier through a Randall 810 speaker cabinet, and a Dark Glass Microtubes 900 version 2 going through a PV Pro 115 and an acoustic BN 115. These cabinets were then recorded with a set of 3 different microphones, an MXL 4000 XL large diaphragm condenser, an ST69 condenser, and an AT4033 condenser. Each portion of the rig, the guitar, the bass 1 and bass 2, would represent the 3 different mixing positions of high, medium, mid, and low that we could then present through the analog rig. Each microphone itself would offer a different frequency response and characteristic to offer kind of a multitude of mixing options when you're actually taking the analog recorded sound, give you a little bit more to shape with, a little bit more to form with. And then each microphone would then go back into Ableton Live and record through the DAW. I have a quick little link here. I want to play you a sample of some of what the actual creative portion of the content ended up being. For those of you that were there for my performance at EIS this year, I can't guarantee it will be as noisy. For those of you that weren't there, it might be a little noisy. So what you heard was about 30 seconds of an A and B, the A being the first 15 seconds of the track, being fully digitally recorded and rendered, and the B being the re-amplified analog version of that track. I will post this link in the messaging section if you do want to check that out later on as well. So once we've got all the creative content created, recorded, delivered, we want to look into our measurements. So we decided to use SMART for this particular project, and by we, I mean me, for the particular reason that it utilizes transfer functions to measure out audio systems. So it is possible with the SMART software to effectively get a mapping of your frequency and phase response out of your amplifier and as well as your cabinets. It will provides an RTA and impulse response as well, which is super useful when you're comparing the digitally written content to the analog recorded content within the digital realm. So instead of measuring out a larger amplification system, you're actually measuring out a digital system and seeing what the difference between your reference track and your measurement track look like. That lets us see what the differences between the analog and the digital would be. And most importantly, because we are dealing with the realm of space, phase traces. Great thing about the SMART software is that it provides phase tracing, which will let you see how the audio interacts in real space. There were a lot of challenges in getting these measurements done. The rendering of the tracks digitally, how they were measured was pretty fickle because a lot of the synthesizer sounds that were used utilize different time-based effects. So the initial run of measurements were all over the place. We couldn't find an impulse response for the measurements to key everything down to one specific reference point that we can measure against. It was like groping through the void for something to hang on to. The initial recordings were, as I said, not done. They were actually MIDI tracks that were played live as opposed to rendered, then replayed. And that caused just a horrible amount of issues. Solutions were to reduce variables, render the wave of digitally written content as a reference for recording and measurement, and then as well use pink noise to measure and map the amplification system before recording to effectively get that full mapping of the analog system that we're looking at. Simplify, simplify, simplify. I think the big hurdle to begin with when beginning the measurement process was I was throwing all of these different variables, all of these different factors, trying to measure everything all at once. And that just leads to, you know, a momentous collection of points of failure. When you have all those points of failure and you're trying to troubleshoot and you're trying to figure out where exactly your measurement went wrong, that's just a hair-pulling moment of, geez, please just let it end. To get it simplified, we use the pink noise measurements of only a portion of the performance system. I actually didn't include in the measurements the two 115 cabinets, as they were using two different amplifiers and were stacked up on top of each other. So you're going to get all sorts of really weird, you know, phase tracing in your measurements. I stuck simply to the 810 cabinet and the 412 cabinet. The results. So Unfortunately, my smart license has expired, well, demo license rather, so I can only really show you screenshots of what our traces look like. Right here we have, oh no, unfortunately I don't have a mouse cursor while I'm in presentation mode to show you. Let's see if we can get out of there. Open this up. All right, we'll just play it. Right here we have a pink noise measurement of the 412 cabinet that was running the Blue Voodoo amplifier. On the very top of the chart, you see a line that is headed with a little acronym LIN. That is our impulse response. We have a phase trace right underneath that. And below that, we actually have a frequency response. This is the same 412 cabinet, but recorded and referenced digitally. So this is, the 412 cabinet live with the content being played. So this is pink noise, this is our live content, and this is actually our digital measurement. So this is the live recording of the digital content going through the cabinet system being referenced against the original digital cabinet and what it looks like against it. We have the same thing going, we also have, this is the digital and analog referenced against each other. And this is actually where we start to see our meat and potatoes of the project. The darker line is the, the darker line is the darker line is our digital, the lighter line is our analog, and we can see that within the realm of phase, the phase traces are actually following each other, although they are inverted. Huntington in the original presentation pointed this out to me. I realized weeks later that one of the reamplification boxes that I used for the project actually has a set polarity. Didn't realize that while I was making the measurements, but good eye on that and caught that quick. When we look down to our frequency response and our magnitude response, this is where a lot of people like to get caught up in the giant, well, is analog better, is digital better argument. They're more or less the same. We see a frequency mapping that pretty much lays over each other. In the 63 hertz realm, we see things get a little bit crazier, but that might just be, well, actually not just might, it is a combination of information. The red line that we have above the frequency response is our coherency. So the closer that line is to your frequency response and your magnitude in that middle line, the less reliable the data is. When we look towards the, I want to say 250 to 1K range of frequency response, we're finding that our analog and digital sound, or rather analog recorded and digital sounds, map together pretty well. This is the same thing. We're looking at our 810 with a pink noise response. This is our 810 live, our 810 live EQ. And no, I'm sorry, this is the 810 live versus the 810 digital. So again, same deal, our magnitude tracing. Outside of just a slight magnitude response, a boost, are just about mapped against each other. Our phase tracing, once again, completely mapped, just inverted because of the polarity. This is the full ensemble. So this was a combination of all the speaker cabinets that were involved, recorded in the room from the center of the room. We have our ensemble after it was recorded, measured in the digital realm. And then this is kind of where it gets a little funky. We have the live combination of all the amplifiers and speaker cabinets against the recorded copy of it. You see that our phase tracing gets a little bit crazier. It's a little bit more off the wall, but that should be expected when you're dealing with a large room recording. We're not dealing with the same distances of microphone to speaker ratio that we were dealing with in the earlier references. So while this might seem to show that there is some sort of craziness going on, that's primarily due to the mic positioning. Conclusions. Coming to some conclusions, one of the big things that I began to contemplate on was, we're talking about this difference between our digital realm and our analog realm, and if there isn't much of a difference when it actually comes down to the meat and potatoes of a magnitude and phase response, then why Why not just do everything digitally? Why not just do anything analogically? And the major factor that comes into that is interfacing. How we as performers, we as musicians, how we in the live sound world interface with our equipment and understand it is going to effectively determine how we deliver the content, deliver the materials that we're looking to convey. I know Adam Wilson was my Culmination professor for last semester, and he is very much so a digital head. He can model an assortment of instruments and amplifiers digitally, and then can easily think of 150 different ways to do that. Whereas I'm not so much in that realm of digital. I'm more in the realm of analog, where if I know I want a particular sound, I want to go in a particular direction, I can go to A, B, C, D, grab the analog equipment and create that sound. So the differences between analog and digital really don't fall so much into the quality or the response of the content, but are interfacing with the tools we need to create it. Points of interest, reamplification versus digital filtering. The reamplification is effectively the same thing that you would do through digital filtering, just on a macro level. These performance systems offer the opportunity for musicians who might not have that much of a knowledgeable skill set within the digital and modeling world to kind of get their hands into that same concept, that same world on a macro level. Tactile interfacing, as I said, this really got me thinking about how we interface with our tools, primarily for content creation and musicianship. And the necessity for control. One thing that I would, if I had an unlimited amount of resources and time, love to do is to be able to take each component of an amplifier and just part by part send signal through it, record the signal response, and then do a comparison from a micro to a macro level. Unfortunately, I don't have the money nor the facilities for that yet. We don't know what the future may hold. And yeah, the realm of tangible difference, physical space and its effects on our perceptions of sound. One of the big tricky things about this project in particular is we're taking something digital, we're making it analog, but then we're re-recording it into digital, and then it's then listened to analog, but in a completely different realm. You know, what you hear when you're listening to the analog recordings is very different from what you hear when you stand in the room between all of the amplifiers. There's a much different effect that is involved, and it kind of gets you thinking that, well, maybe the whole even physical space is pretty moot if we're all experiencing it in different spaces at different points. Overall challenges, resources. This was a really resource-intensive project. Space, working space was a really big issue, as well as being able to control variables in that space. I had to use a shared studio space, so microphone setup was, you know, every time you come in, set it up again, break it down, set it up again, break it down. This goes into time as well. Because of that, most of the sessions I had for writing, recording, amplification were about 7 to 8 hours at a time. So that was pretty labor intensive and drove me a little bit kooky. Imposter syndrome, I think, is something that came up quite a bunch, where when I finally had the smart system down and I was getting my measurements, I didn't necessarily believe that I got them right, and I had to constantly like question myself again and again, like, there's no way this is actually, like, I messed up somewhere, didn't I? I definitely messed up. I do not know what I'm doing whatsoever. But that constant questioning was really healthy because it made sure that I got accurate measurements of what I was looking for. Want to say a really big thank you to actually the whole ENT staff. I've been working on this project and the idea for the project since, oh goodness, I want to say September of 2019. Adam Wilson, I want to give you a huge thank you as well. Constantly driving me to kind of push whenever I kind of wanted to give up on certain aspects of the project, especially on the creative portion. John Huntington for pushing me to really chase after the measurement portion as well and follow through with it. And yeah, both of you guys for definitely just cracking that whip on me and pushing me to my limits. All right, and yeah, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Chris.
What was your least favorite part of the project, or your
That is
research?
a really good question. What was my least favorite part? I can say that the measurements were the most fun, because when you get that kind of eureka moment and like you're dealing with something such as SMART, which we offer, I had the opportunity and the privilege to take a 3-day class on. When you see that it clicks and it works, you're like, no way, this is actually happening. I would say my least favorite part was probably the creative process. Having to constantly review my own work and listen to it again and again and again. As I got closer and closer to the point of doing measurements, I started to question my own content quality and thinking, well, I should just scrap all of this. I should just get rid of it. I should just restart it altogether. But that's something that I feel as a creator comes naturally, doubt in your own work. And so I haven't scrapped it. I'm still finishing it. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do so without access to my studio space. So won't be until things are a little bit loosened up and a little less risky to be traveling back and forth between Manhattan and Brooklyn. But as much as that was a rabbit hole of self-doubt, even hating that, I still kind of loved it.
So, it sounds like you really enjoyed. Cool. Sorry.
Oh no. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'll save my comment.
No, I'm just telling him that it sounds like he really enjoyed, and then I'm glad that even though he disliked that part, he overcame that.
Yeah. So Chris, I apologize that you've heard this comment from me a million times. So I'm just going to say it for the benefit of people listening now who haven't heard all our conversations about this. So essentially what you did was something really cool. I mean, even though in general, like you're saying, the digital source material and the analog material, sort of lined up. They're not super significant differences. There are audible differences. And essentially what you did was create a very sophisticated filter using a bunch of tube amps and speaker cabinets and microphones. And, this is, there's a whole field around this where people, capture sounds that come through analog systems and then embed those in digital systems, because people want it, even though they want the convenience of using a digital box. I know you don't, but a lot of people do like the convenience of using a digital box, but they still really love the sounds that are produced by these analog configurations. So I wonder if you've thought about working in that area, if that interests you at all.
I have. I've actually been looking into the field of digital signal processing, what education I would have to pursue to look further into it, as well as I've been working with some of the musical projects that I have. We were on the way of effectively measuring our sound through the combination of the different speaker cabinets we had and what have you, and pinpointing it like accurately so that we could replicate it again and again and again and again and keep it consistent with how we sound in the studio to a live setting to a recorded setting as well.
Yeah, so I mean, just to add to that, something you might want to check out is there's this thing I came across recently. It's called Elk Audio Operating System, and it's basically they're kind of they've created a very low latency Linux operating system for virtualizing, basically for running VST plugins. They use the VST format. And the idea behind the operating system is to create digital devices that are on these embedded systems that can be housed in an analog-like interface that you're really more happy to use than a computer or something like that. So it's taking this whole interface thing all the way around. So start with the original analog device, which has all the fun buttons and knobs, and it's a physical thing, and then turning it into a digital thing, which is kind of, it's cool and practical in terms of portability, but sort of inaccessible in terms of the interface, and then bringing it back to the interface that you like. I don't know, it's something to check out. I think their ideas are pretty interesting, and they have an open framework. So you could get like it runs on like a Raspberry Pi. You can actually get what they call a hat for the thing that allows you to have analog ins and outs and stuff like that. And you basically code using C++ or Juice and create. You're shaking your head.
No. I'm saying that's absolutely perfect timing. I'm taking ins and outs at the moment and working with the Arduino system and.
Okay, cool. So yeah, basically, same thing.
Effectively, this project is translated into that in a lot of different ways, and that I'm thinking of different ways to create a small little onboard signal processor, a little instrument, a little device that you can use to do all sorts of signal processing and what have you. And this sounds like actually more of a viable direction to go in as far as having a medium to work in.
Yeah, it's really similar, I think. Yeah. Do you want to say hi?
Hello.
I'll just jump in really quickly and just say congratulations on this. I think it was like the night before Thanksgiving or something. We were in there trying to get this thing to work, the measurement to work, and just realized that it wasn't going to work. And that was like, you could have just gone, and that was just given up or something. But instead, you're like, okay, we're just going to delay this. And you went off and then just, finished it up next semester and came out with a great piece. And again, I think, like I was saying about Michelle's project before, I think this is a really good example of a culmination project where you push your knowledge, you learn something new, and do all that, because a lot of, it's not just about completing a project, but it's about sort of growing intellectually. So I think you accomplished all of that. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm fascinated by your empirical analysis and that you're trying to challenge the assumption, the age-old assumption around analog and digital. I guess my one question is, what are some other variables that we could look at besides sort of magnitude and sort of impulse response that might show some disparities or sort of differences in terms of like texture, the texture of sound, the quality of sound?
Absolutely.
If you were to
One thing
continue
that Adam and I had talked about briefly was to get sort of a qualitative surveying going. Unfortunately, the means of doing that within the academic setting are a little constraining in terms of time frames. There's ethics boards and committees to take in consideration, which should be in place, absolutely, 120%, but they do add some significant time frame constraints to a project. Like Adam said, there are audibly some differences. How you can qualify those is really kind of up in the air. I think this, for the most part, from a system build perspective and how we build our systems that we make our content in was more of a unifying revelation, and that how we interface, like I said, with our systems is going to be very different. How we're able to produce our content is going to be different based on those systems. So like me and Adam were saying, some people work better with our digital world, some people work better with our AMP world, but understanding that you can effectively get the same responses. There's no inherent, I want to say, universal difference between the two. With fine tuning and patience and lots of attention to detail, you can make an analog frequency sound the same as a digital frequency. There's not going to be, a huge absolute difference.
Well,
did you apply this? Oh, sorry, Tony.
Well, just following up on what you were saying, Heidi, is I found that looking at the waveforms on the thing, rather than giving sort of a subjective thing of people say hearing the difference, we were looking at the difference on the waveform. And I wonder if there could be a different, better way to graphically represent the difference. I was kind of dying for a way, you know, what does that mean when the two things diverge, and how does that sound? And you know, okay, it's obvious when there's a giant divergence there, and then, well, we're like, you were giving evidence of like, well, that was this and that was that, you know, maybe having nothing to do with something else. But I wonder if there's a different way to represent this.
So in response to kind of delving deeper into much more notched frequency ranges, when we see, you know, a difference of like, let's say 15 decibels, and to get an idea of what that might sound like, that's where the idea of simplify comes in, and being able to break down the system into its components, having the time to actually, let's say, replicate that one very narrow band of frequency response, and then have a kind of selective, individualized audio recording of it to hear what that one little area would sound like on its own. Again, resources are, I would say, a pretty large issue, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that deep into it.
There's something that we did, I think we talked about briefly at the beginning of this project, but it was again another layer of stuff that would have increased the complexity a lot. It's the you know, there's Kepstral analysis of signals, which is basically, you know, if you take it's essentially a Fourier transform of the log of the power spectrum, and the Kepstrom the Kepstrom kind of corresponds with timbre, so you know, tone quality. So like, you know, a flute playing one note will have different Kepstral coefficients than a cello playing the same, you know, the same, or maybe we should say a violin because it's in the same range. But you can have Kepstral coefficients for any kind of signal. In fact, you know, Kepstral coefficients can be good for helping machine learning models do speech recognition or voice recognition, stuff like that. So that's one way to represent. It's still graphical, right? It's still a graph, but it might be a little bit more meaningful to how humans sort of listen to it. You know, sort of a Fourier transform of a Fourier transform.
Yeah, those were some of the variables I was thinking about. And also I was wondering if you had patched in your performance, which used the human voice, which might have more timbre, pitch, and all of these other types of shifts rather than the instruments themselves. Do you know what I mean? Which
yeah,
also,
no,
I loved your performance, by the way. I don't think I got to tell you that.
I actually, for the sake of simplicity, did not include vocals into this portion. That's actually the next step for the creative portion of the project, is to record vocals and that whole vocal performance. But yeah, no, absolutely. I would love to see the differences of, you know, what the vocals through just sheer digital processing versus a re-amplified version of that processing, what that would look like exactly, especially when you're dealing with such, I want to say, forward to mind timbres that, you know, we're so very familiar with already.
Okay, profound. Are there any more comments, questions? This was fascinating.
I do have a quick one. So I think one of the things that that isn't measured by SMART, but does have a pretty big effect on the difference between digital and audio signals, is harmonic distortion. And I'm wondering if that was a concept that you had thought about exploring and how that might fit into this project.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of harmonic distortion, that's something that I personally came to the conclusion of, that having this analog system, it creates a presence. You know, you have all of these amplifiers, you have these massive stacks, and you have air being pushed. And when they interact with each other in a live setting, you do have that harmonic distortion that occurs from all the combination. I mean, that's what we're looking at when we're looking at our phase traces, to see how much potential for harmonic distortion might, you know, differ the magnitude responses in the DAW recorded tracks, re-recorded tracks, I'm sorry, versus, you know, what potential harmonic distortions might exist in the digitally written tracks. That would require, I would say, a live space. That is something that I originally wanted to focus the project on, was being able to kind of replicate those harmonic distortions, that presence, as you may call it, in a digital space. That, again, is something I have considered greatly and would love to be able to look into in the future as well.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, so all the presenters gave excellent presentations today, and wow, you have come a long way. And I felt at one point this semester will never end, and and all the projects would suffer, but we ended up having many impressive culmination projects. It's really remarkable. And so let's have a big round of applause for all the presenters for today, and all the students who successfully completed their projects this semester, about 30 of them, and all the faculty and the staff in your department. Thank you very much. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any thoughts? If not, faculty, we're going to have a grading session to follow, actually, after a short break.
On
Yes,
the same Zoom link?
Yeah, yeah. So we should kick out all the students, of course, and we should stop streaming live.
You might have some Zoom bombers.
Right.
And
Okay.
there was almost 20 people that stayed on YouTube the entire thing. So
Oh, that's wonderful with the short notice. Great.
Yeah.
And thank you all, and thank you, students. And the faculty, when should we start? Like 10 minutes?
yeah,
Right?
3 o'clock, I think.
Yes. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to all students. And
Congratulations, everybody.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.